we'll go live in like.
Okay, we can invite participants in. All the best, guys. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-webinar presentation. I am Mansi Kunjikar, and I'll be your host for today. Just cross-checking, can you see my PPT?
Yes.
Great. We will start the webinar in a bit. In the meantime, please introduce yourself in the chat window, where you're from, what you do, and what are you expecting from this session. Great, I can see some of us already doing this. I can see some mentor teachers here. Great, teachers from Secunderabad, Delhi Public School, Secunderabad, amazing. AG Teachers College, hello Manish. I can see Seema from Pune joining us. Amazing. It is absolutely amazing to see participants from all over join us today. Learning and exposure for teachers and educators has been the inspiration behind FIRCI webinars. You can go through different webinars and learning paths conducted on the portal. The link for the same will be shared in the chat window soon. We believe your time is valuable and we want to acknowledge your presence in this session, and we will therefore be providing participants with a certificate of attendance. This is made available for those participants who attend the entire session today. We'll share more details on how to fill the feedback form and access the certificate towards the end of the webinar. You can join a FIRCI webinar on 2 platforms, Zoom as well as YouTube. Zoom live link will be shared and pasted shortly in the chat window. This live link is also available on the calendar invite shared with all of you. For all of us to have an amazing experience in this webinar, we request all of us to follow a few requests. The first is, this is the mic button. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can see this mic button. Please keep yourself unmuted so that we can hear the speaker correctly. You can unmute yourself only in the situation where you are asking a question to the speaker or he's asked you to answer. You can click on the video button to switch on your video, and please, we request you to keep your video off in case there is any bandwidth issue. But like all speakers, we would like to see all of your lovely faces here. So please do keep your videos on. This is the chat button. If you click on this, as you've already been introducing yourself on the same feature, you can share any message, any observation, or any questions you have. We also have a Q&A button, if you see on the bottom, where you can input your questions. Our FIRCI team today will be collating all of these questions throughout the webinar and sharing them with Abhijit sir towards the end of the webinar for the Q&A session. After the webinar, we request you to continue your learning by talking to people and implementing your learnings from the webinar in your work. If you want to watch a recording of this webinar, it will be available on in our webinars page on the portal, as well as on our YouTube channel. To attend the next webinar and to keep getting updates from FIRCI, you can sign up on www.firki.co to get updates. It is now my pleasure to introduce Abhijit sir. I hope he's here. Hello, Abhijit sir. This is the DTU FIRCI webinar series. We're delighted to have all of you join for today's session titled Designing Learning Experiences Through Sports in partnership with Slum Soccer. I'm your host, Mansi Gunjikar. I work at FIRCI and I'll be your guide throughout the webinar. I would like to take a quick moment to share the objectives of today's webinar. Through this webinar, we will be able to discover the significant role sports play in a child's learning and development, explore impactful practices from Slum Soccer, and learn about inclusion and best practices, expand your knowledge and enhance your teaching strategies. Education, in our view, is not limited to academic development. Developing yourself through sports is as much a part of education as math and science. And today, through this webinar, we are about to learn how to do that. Our speaker, Dr. Abhijit Barse, CEO of Slum Soccer, Krida Vikas Sansthan Nagpur, is a visionary leader dedicated to making a positive impact in the lives of underprivileged children and youth. Returning to India from US in 2006, he transformed Slum Soccer into a renowned sports for development organization with international recognition. Driven by his inclusive approach, the organization has received prestigious awards such as FIFA Diversity Award and World Football Summit 2020, Football for Good Awards. Dr. Barse is an accomplished public speaker and has delivered TEDx talks. He headed an experts panel at the International Conventions on Football Business and was on the network board of Street Football World. Slum Soccer's success saga has inspired recently released film Jhund with Amitabh Bachchan in the lead. Welcome, Dr. Abhijit Barse. I cannot wait for the webinar to begin. As we move towards the webinar, I have a few requests of the participants. We request you to keep your cameras on for effective interaction. To avoid any disturbance, please do keep your mics off unless the speakers ask you to unmute. Use the Q&A function to ask a question or raise a hand to say something. And please participate enthusiastically. Thank you, all of you. Welcome to FIRCI webinars. Dr. Abhijit Barse, over to you.
Thank you, Mansi, for such a wonderful welcome. I'm so thrilled to be here. And as I was discussing with Mansi earlier, sports has always been at the forefront of all of our lives at some point in past, but it is no longer the case. And let's also take a moment to think about that, as well as think about what it can bring to the table. Can I ask Mansi if you can do the poll?
Yes, we'll launch the poll. Okay, we have 66, 67 answers so far. I would encourage all participants to share their answers on the poll. We'll close the poll in about 30 seconds. All right, shall we close the poll, Abhijit sir? You're on mute, sorry.
Please, please. If you have substantial answers, we can stop. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So the answer of the first question was an overwhelming yes. And this is actually higher than what I thought. So congratulations, everyone. But as you go to the next question, you can see that only 22% of you took part in some activity last week. 37 of you took part earlier this year, and 41 cannot even remember when they last took part in a sports activity. And this seemingly normal questions can tell you a lot about not just ourselves, but also the society at large. Like how we sideline play once we reach a certain age, how priorities shift from having fun to being very serious, and how play suddenly becomes an option that is slowly going away. Now, this is something which we call the play deficit, the lack of play. A child, on an average, according to the UN estimate, should play an hour of sports, not just sports, any play would do, a day, an hour a day. And yet there are only 2 PE periods in our class settings in a week. In UK, however, there are more than 15 hours of structured play in their timetable a week. So you can, as you can see, this is definitely a play deficit. And if you relate that to the poll earlier, you can very well see how and why we have been prioritizing this in the last, we're keeping it in the last, and suddenly it goes away. By the time you're in 20s, it takes a backseat, 30s, absolutely another step behind, and then on and so forth. So today we will not go into this, to be honest. We will talk more about what we can do to make sure that this is not repeated with our kids. How we can create a more sports-like culture. But before we jump into the discussion today, I want to welcome everyone to today's presentation on the transformative power of sports in learning and development. We'll delve slightly into the impact of sports on a child's growth, highlight the best strategies from our organization, and explore practical things that you can do even in your own settings. My name is Abhijit Barse. I've been heading Slum Soccer since last 12 years. Our organization, however, began in 2002 with a simple broken bucket. Some kids were kicking it in the slum in a rain. But our founder, all he could see was the potential that is being wasted on that pitch. He went home, brought footballs, gave it to them, and that became Slum Soccer. Today, we have multiple programs addressing various different objectives, various different groups in different cities, all using sports as a platform. Recently, we also introduced Kabaddi, Kho-Kho, athletics, and volleyball. But our main focus still remains football as a tool. Let me share a very short anecdote from one of our participants who shared his feedback. earlier last year, and then let's jump into this. Yeah.
अच्छा, इस मॉडल सिटी दिल्ली प्रोग्राम से आपकी कम्युनिटी को क्या फायदा हुआ?
मतलब रेगुलरली खेलना स्टार्ट करा था, तो हमारे दोस्त लोग, हम लोग सोचते थे कि इस पार्क में खेलेंगे, इस पार्क में, तो कभी कभी हम लोग पार्क से बाहर भी निकाल देते थे। तो जो स्लम सॉकर ने क्या करा, जो एक पार्क है ना ये वाला, वो पहले बहुत गंदगी थे, हम मतलब शूज पहन के भी नहीं खेल पाते थे, पहले तो शूज में घिस जाते थे पत्थर वत्थर की वजह से। तो दीदी लोग ने क्या करा, मतलब स्लम सॉकर की टीम ने ऐसा करा, तो उसमें गड्ढे भी बहुत थे, तो उन्होंने उसको साफ वाफ करा, उसमें पेड़ वेड़ लगाए, फिर अब वो इतना साफ है कि वहाँ पे टूर्नामेंट हो सकते हैं, और हम खेलते बिना चप्पलों के भी खेल सकते हैं, और भी बहुत सारी चीजें करी। अब जैसे कि हम मतलब हम पूरी टीम खेल सकते हैं उधर।
अच्छा, तो ये मॉडल सिटी दिल्ली की जो प्रोग्राम है, इस प्रोग्राम ने आपको कैसे हेल्प की?
तो मतलब पहले कि मैं पहले सोचता था कि मैं फुटबॉल खेलूंगा, तो मुझे सिर्फ पता था कि हाँ फुटबॉल खेलते हैं, और इतना इंडिया में था नहीं कि हाँ फुटबॉल खेल सकते हैं। और मैंने सिर्फ बाहर की कंट्रीज में मैंने रोनाल्डो, मैसी, इन सबको खेलते हुए देखा, ऐसे इतना देखा नहीं मैं। तो फिर जब स्लम सॉकर जब आया ना, तो फिर मेरे को लगा कि हाँ कि मैं फुटबॉल खेल सकता हूँ, क्योंकि दीदी लोगों ने एफर्ट डाले कि हाँ खेलो। और उस टाइम मैं सोचता भी नहीं था कि मैं अपने दोस्तों के साथ खेलूंगा। फिर मेरे दोस्त लोग भी खेलने लगे, फिर मैं खेलने लगा, तो फिर मेरे दोस्त लोग भी आने लगे, फिर ऐसे ऐसे करके जुड़ने लगे। और हमें और भी चीजें बताई, मतलब हमें सिर्फ फुटबॉल ही खिलाते थे, हमें अच्छी चीजें बताते थे, हमें गुट्टा जो होता है, बैट होता है। आजकल के टाइम पे लोग इतना नहीं बताते, कोई नहीं बताते कि हाँ इतने इतने प्रोटीन होते हैं, और हमें हाथ धोना चाहिए, और हम
अच्छा, बताइए कि इस प्रोजेक्ट की वजह से क्या फायदा हुआ है मॉडल सिटी दिल्ली में?
मतलब इस प्रोजेक्ट में ऐसा था कि पहले के यहाँ के जो बच्चे थे वो इतना फुटबॉल नहीं खेलते थे, मतलब वो गेम ही नहीं खेलते थे, वो क्या करते थे, वो नशा करने लगे थे। उनके जो पेरेंट्स थे वो उनसे परेशान आ रहे थे कि अब क्या करें, तो फिर उन्हें जैसे है वो वैसे करते रहने देते थे। तो फिर जब से हमारी दीदियों ने एफर्ट लगाए कि हाँ आ जाओ खेलो, तो एक दो दिन ऐसे ऐसे चला, तो फिर बच्चे आने लगे, फिर एक दो दिन तक वो आए आए, तो फिर उन्हें और मजा आने लगा। तो फिर इसी वजह से कुछ बच्चों का नशा नशा पानी छूट गया, और इसलिए वो हमारे साथ अभी अभी तक हमारे साथ खेलते हैं, और हमारी
आपको कैसा लगता है ये बदलाव को देख के?
बहुत कुछ दोस्त ऐसे थे जो हाँ थोड़ा छोटा मोटा नशा तो करते ही थे, तो उन्होंने वो भी बंद कर दिया, उनको इतना टाइम नहीं मिलता, वो हमारे साथ आते हैं, उनके
अच्छा, इस मॉडल सिटी दिल्ली प्रोग्राम से आप
Sorry, I'm just trying to go to the next slide.
Go to the extreme right of your screen, Abhijit. Outside of the video, but within the slide.
Yeah.
No, down. You can click on that side.
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much, Mansi. Sorry. So, so in today's very quick webinar, we'll talk briefly about how sports can open doors to learning, and also some floodgates of questions and learnings that happens, incidentally. How our approach has evolved over the last 12 or so years, and how you can adopt these ideas in your own context and settings. The story that I shared was from a boy who has been a part of our program for last 3 years in Delhi. This slum is mostly inhabited by a rag picker community, a waste segregation community where all the waste from Delhi comes, and the children who would take part in segregation of the waste would earn a couple of hundred rupees and spend most of it on drugs. And when we began this program, the only open area in the slum was this huge place where they were dumping their collections of the day. They would segregate it there, and none of the children would come out and play. But as we began, slowly the community started to come together. Today, we have more than 300 participants who are registered and take part in our activities at least 2 times a week. We also have a youth leadership program for upcoming guys like Shashi, who you heard right now, where they can then continue their journey and become into something of a sports advocate. Let me share another incident. This is Karina Salami. She lives in Nagpur. She's 19 years old. When she joined the program, she was a student just like Shashi. At Nagpur, she was taught by Vikas and Sejal, and she continued to develop. After she passed through 12, she started showing interest in engaging the children near her house. The coaches who saw her invited her to bring those children in the facility that we have near her place. Today, she has more than 16 kids who play with her. She's not one of those, how you define it, the most intelligent or the most outgoing person, but she smiles when she's on the field. Her confidence changes when she puts on the uniform and coaches the children. The transformation is just not to herself. Her family now views her as a leader. The community listens to her. These small stories are what made us believe that what we are doing is the right thing. Karina's story also serves as a reminder that each of us have this capacity to make profound difference in our own small ways. It doesn't matter what our academic settings are. Through sports, we can cultivate leaders. We can build communities. We can bring out the hidden potential in children and youth. So let's go a little further. What exactly happens during one of our activities, like the one she attended, like the one Shashi before her attends? Where a coach on a designated place appears, he already has equipment, he has set the pitch, and children start to come in. He meets them each with a high five or a firm handshake, a good evening or a good morning. One of the easiest way to know how long a child has been part of a program is when they come brightly smiling at you, give you a firm handshake and say good morning or good evening, sir. This has been one of the most easiest way to find out how much the child has gained in terms of confidence. So once the child comes in, the coach sets the pitch. He usually has a pre-plan. What happens during this pitch and a typical session would be there's a lot of learning going on, but it just doesn't happen like that. The child learns through experience. Imagine kicking a ball or running after someone or passing the baton to someone else. It doesn't become best in the first go. You have to keep trying. You have to keep practicing. And slowly you get more and more. So this skill development slowly happens. If you can enlighten the child about this, he or she also becomes involved in his own development. In younger children especially, the hand-eye coordination. We've been working with children from class 3 to class 5, and even in such advanced ages, the hand-eye coordination is sometimes missing. What we call physical literacy, the balance, also is still developing in some of the cases, and which is why taking part in sport is one of the easiest way or the easiest gift you can give to that child to develop into a physically fit individual. It's not just about what you physically practice and do on the football pitch or any pitch for that matter. You understand the rules. There is a lot of interaction that goes. Children, or if you've been a part of any sport, you understand that the fun is had not only on the ground, but this camaraderie extends well beyond the sports or the game. Most of our friends are the friends we made on the ground, where we were sharing our struggles, our physical exhaustion with. It develops our character. Losing is never easy. And someone who learns the importance of losing is someone who can keep coming and trying back. And I don't just say this because for the sake of saying it. We've seen people, we've seen kids who've been part of our program really develop into very phenomenal people who are there leading other small children. A lot of our planning also goes into the type of reflection and feedback that we will do with the kids. And this doesn't happen naturally. When we ask them what went well and what didn't go well, they struggle initially. But when they start sharing, it's not just the things that they feel on the ground, it's also the things that they feel off the ground. And this leads to learning. One of our very effort is also not just to teach them what they can learn on the field, but how it also relates to what they can do off the field also. Similarly, another part of this would be also where you go and play a match, a tournament. One of the first things you learn, as I was saying in the earlier slide, is not just teamwork and collaboration, because that absolutely you have to talk to your partners, your players, your teammates. You also have to talk to your opponents. With your team, you understand which pass means goal and which pass doesn't mean goals. There's a lot of decision making that happens there. One of the best things about sport is that it teaches you all of this without actually having been taught as much. You learn it through experience. And if your facilitator is a good one, he will make sure that he makes space for you to actually understand what is happening. This also gives you this edge of becoming a lifelong learner. We have seen that children who have participated in sports, girls especially, have in some of the cases, some of our leaders have actually taken active steps in postponing their marriages. They've continued their education because they felt that this physical fitness also transformed into mental health. They were able to take their own calls and go forward. Sportsmanship and fair play, as we say, is one of the most underrated qualities that sports can teach you. Winning with grace is something that becomes easy if you are on the field most of the time. Otherwise, we see children who give up very easily or become extreme when they don't get what they want. So being on a sports team also teaches you that. How to negotiate, how to also take a step back, come back, and then give your best. But if you might be thinking, if all this is so good, why it is not happening everywhere? Why is it not happening so often? Like, you know, there are several people playing on the field, several really good kids who are learning, taking part in sports. Why is it not happening that everyone who is on the sports field is becoming an excellent leader or a good communicator or XYZ? This is because there is no effort put into it. See, sports creates this natural area where there's a lot of learning that can happen, but you have to be very thoughtful about it, very directive about it. If you want to create a space for something to happen within the game, you have to stop, you have to plan properly, and then take that moment to talk about it. However, this field of sports for development, as we call it nowadays, is relatively new. It began in, I think, late 1990s, early 2000s, where it was used by several organizations in Africa when they were tackling the issues of AIDS pandemic, AIDS and HIV. And they used the game to initially talk to youth about young men, about using protection, making wise decisions. And soon enough, they saw really good results, and it spread across from there. Today, sports for development is a well-established area and is being used worldwide. So let me take you to what we have learned or experienced through our programs. So to create this, what I'm talking about, this learning experience through a football field or any sports for that matter. I'm sorry, I keep referring to football, but it could be any sports that serves the need of that space. But when you approach any sports for creating a space of learning, you have to first of all set objectives. And sometimes the objective can be just having fun or having a dialogue. One of the things we try and keep away a lot is also that too much ideas being poured into a session, whereas a child, all they want to do is to have fun. But yes, going and approaching a session as you would do in a classroom, similarly in a field, it is a good idea. Every practice session offers you an opportunity to delve a little bit deeper into the child's lives. So if you integrate reflective practices, the child not only incorporates that into his or her thinking methods, it also helps them to think about what went wrong or what went right. I know that a lot of you also use this method of asking for examples from one of the kids who knows more or knows better. Similarly, in sports also, in the football field also, we will ask for, let's say I want to teach dribbling, and I know one of the kids knows really good. So I will ask him to demonstrate. This not only boosts his or her confidence, it also, facilitates this peer-to-peer learning, and children thrive on this. When you're talking about facilitated or guided discussions, one of the cases that come to my mind, we were talking about this. We were working with this group where we had already set two separate programs, one for boys and one for girls. And on one of the occasions, we had to bring them together because we always feel that gender equality has to exist on the ground as well. So when we set out to do, we didn't take them to the classroom to talk about gender equality. We mixed the teams. And to begin with, where the boys were a little hesitant, we said that, see, we'll change a rule. We'll say that if the girls score, it is 2 goals. And if the boys score, it is just 1 goal. And we blew the whistle. The game started. And as you can imagine, all the boys were passing balls to the girls and they were scoring. And in the halftime, we switched the rules. We said that now we will, it will be equal. Even if the girl scores, it will be just 1 goal. But even in that short period of time, with this slight change of rule, the boys were able to see the girls in new light. The girls were not just beginners, they were also playing at the same level. But the boys were unable to see that. And this small shift, small change of rules helped us to have discussion about how we view things. Every now and then you'll come across such an opportunity in your own context. It's about sometimes not just following the rules, but also flipping the rules. And we were able to then connect this with how things happen in real life. Like how we sometimes misjudge people. And then if we give them a chance, they are scoring the same as us. So yes, it is about creating a space where learning and fun happens, but mostly fun first. Let's bring it into more of a context, like how did we do it? In the communities where we work mostly, also in the schools that we work, they don't always have everything. I'm sure you also have the same stories working in the education sector. We know that how we deal with shortages or lack of facilities or lack of access to things in our own ways. But always remember that this is something which we learned over a period of time, that we create this space so that a child can come out and play. When you're thinking of a sports for development approach, think about the child first. The facilities that you have, don't think about them. Don't think about the competition. Don't think about the excellence. That naturally comes later. But the child will absorb more when he's trying to have fun rather than when you're trying to force something onto him. So they naturally take those in. We've seen that in games and in ideas, when we are discussing this on the pitch, they are much more open to having a dialogue than just, so there will always be some of them who are standing behind or don't want to engage in, but this creates a level playing field. First, they have to enjoy. They have to have a safe space. So as I was saying this, we will all need place. We will never have enough space, but whatever we have, We have to make sure that we are able to utilize that. Think what that physical activities impact will be on the child's overall development. One of the first things, or one of the major thing, is also about creating inclusive environment. So one of the programs that we work in, it's called Deaf Kids Goal, where we are teaching life skills to deaf children using football as a delivery mechanism. And we thought that after a year or so, we thought that this could be an easy introduction to to the hearing children. So we brought our deaf participants to participate in a tournament with the hearing ones. And we could see the initial hesitation. We could see the reluctance of the hearing ones to interact with the deaf participants. But the deaf participants were unfazed. They actually went ahead, they made friends. And as for all of our approach, we mixed the teams. And by the end of this whole day of tournament, they were friends. The hearing participants could actually sign in their own names and communicate with the deaf participants. A lot of our programming also includes life skills. I spoke briefly about team spirit and cooperation. It's easier to talk about communication, decision-making, critical thinking when you're on the field and you can point that out. So we use that a lot. If this was one of the best practices I was going to tell you, it's one of the easiest way to talk to them about life skills when you're on the pitch. Also, when you're engaging with children, think long-term. It's not going to be easy. Things are not going to change overnight. So when you're thinking about integrating a sports program in your teaching or in any of your programs that you're using, think very long-term. Think 3 years or 4 years. So the picture here is from one of the communities where we were working with the girls. Our Shakti Girls program is for adolescent girls, where we talk about menstrual health management, gender-based violence, and reproductive health. And we saw there was a lot of reluctance when it came to participating in tournaments, especially when the girls had to travel. But we also knew that the girls would speak with their mothers. So we went to the mothers and we said that, once a week, we will be thrilled if you can come, if you can find time. And they did. And once they started to come, our girls were able to travel out of the city and some even out of the state, all because we could involve their mothers in the tournament. This year, we will be conducting our first Mothers Cup in Delhi for all the participants' mothers. So if I were to tell you one of the takeaways you could take from this thing when you're planning to do this for your own, don't think very complicated things. Don't think very costly things. Think, what are the games that fit in your context? Is it Kho-Kho? Is it Kabaddi? It's volleyball? Or even if it is a game of tag. Think easy, think small. Also, you can change the rule to suit your context. Not everyone is physically fit, able to run for 20 minutes, and that's a good place to start. Think about the last child who's sitting at the back of the class who you want to engage in a physical activity. And then plan it according to them, because this activity has to be fun. Think engagement. Like, will that child engage? Because even if they don't want to play physically, they want to be hanging around the pitch. So in some of our cases, when we know that this child won't be running around, we'll tell them, why don't you goal keep? Or why don't you help us collect the ball? Why don't you keep the score? In some way or the other, we are able to engage with them. We are able to keep them on the field. And that slowly changes. Slowly he or she will come and play with us. But it has to become very small. Let me sum this up. I know I am not going to go too deep into it. Otherwise, it will be another full hour of session. But I just want to sum it up with some few things. Whenever you're thinking about a sports for development program, think about accessibility. Think about, as I was saying earlier, that involving children with physical disabilities. Of course, like with this type of disabilities, there will be different barriers. But if everyone is able to engage, that is one of the best things you can do, because we are not talking about we are not talking about competition. We are not talking about excellence. This is about getting everyone to be physically fit. It also helps to have everyone on board. Like, ask the children what they want to play, because you'll be surprised what they say. Rather than saying like, let's go and play cricket, you can ask them, what do you want to play? And use that as an opportunity. See, for us, it was a learning experience when we started working with deaf children. We were there because we knew we didn't know much, but we also knew that once you involve everyone, it becomes easy. So we have now 14 trained deaf coaches who are going back into deaf schools and teaching other deaf children. And they themselves are part of our discussions now when we think about, okay, are we going to do this tournament? Are we going to do this session? They are there and you have to involve them. As I said earlier also, the programming has to be tailored. It can't be one size cannot fit all. Even with different age groups and different physical abilities, you have to think about what will be best suited for that particular age group. And in the end, I would like to sum it up by saying that it has to be fun. So you have to keep it simple. The learning can come from behind. But if you emphasize, no, I will use this session to talk about X, Y, Z, and you go into with that mindset, the child shuts off. But if you just plan it properly, give it enough space, they come themselves and they realize that they have this open space because you have created it. It's football, as I would say, it's sports, it's fun. Let's keep it that way. Let's engage everyone and bring in more and more physical fitness into our own and everyone else's life also. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Abhijit sir. It is incredibly inspiring to see the amount of work that Slum Soccer is doing. We have a few questions. I also request all the participants to share their questions in the chat window. The first question we have is from Sushma Goel. Sports, according to you, is only outdoor games, or does it include indoor games as well?
Thank you for the question, Sushma. It has to be a certain amount of physical movement. That is what we consider. Of course, there are games like chess and carom board, which we also use from time and time when the space is a constraint. But in order to have a more physical dialogue, we consider that having even a small open space, like none of the schools that we work with have a full-scale football pitch also. Sometimes whatever they have is even used for parking cars or dumping. So we know that space is always a constraint. But no matter how small the pitch is, we want to bring them from outside, bring them outside from the classroom setting. That change of scenario itself adds a certain change of mindset for them also. So we, well, like as an organization, we always try and say, like, even if it is a small space, even if it is, you cannot include all of the children, bring them in batches, but get them in an open space.
That is helpful to know, Abhijit sir. I think the government mandates that all schools should have a sports ground or an outdoor facility. And if they don't, they can use the public park closest to them. In case there are schools with lower access to physical space, what would be a good indoor game for children to practice?
Sorry, can you elaborate a little bit?
So there are schools which do not actually have an external facility, a ground or they don't even, some schools don't have access to a public park either. In that case, what is a good game to play indoors?
anything that is safe, especially if you are going to get children running around. You don't want them crashing into each other. You don't want them crashing into walls.
Right.
Definitely not tag or something that makes you run too much. So I have to think about, like, even in the smallest of spaces, we always try to keep the games which are like a little bit of movement is there. But
Hmm.
we are also conscious about the children running into walls or running into each other in a small space. So I will have to I will also have to leave it to you to decide how much space you have. If it is really small, then I would suggest no. Please don't make them unsafe by asking them to run or catch each other. But in certain cases, even games like passing the parcel, I know it's a very small, you can't call it game, but it gets you moving. It gets you slightly here and there. So yeah, anything that you can use.
But your prime recommendation is definitely a change of pace and a game outside.
Yes.
That would be the first
Yeah.
priority.
Even if you don't end up playing a full scale game, as I said, that it has to suit your suit the area as well as the children who are there. You cannot if the children, if you have a space enough for a kabaddi, do that. It doesn't have to be always volleyball. It doesn't have to be whatever games gets them out there.
Great. Thank you for that. We have a question from Richa Sethi, who's asking, how can we contact these coaches who teach specially able children?
Okay. Now you can share my contacts, right? To give you more context, we are working specifically with deaf youth right now and in deaf schools. So that information we can definitely share. And we also have a full-time interpreter whose expertise is again in sports. So that helps a lot. It has taken us 4 years to get here. But yeah, we that is something which we feel that it's very much needed also.
Thank you so much, sir.
I need to share my details with whoever needs it. Yeah.
Definitely. Towards the end of this webinar, we'll share Abhijit sir's contact information and you can reach out to him for any of these queries. So there's also a question about what was the biggest hurdle in terms of inclusion for you? One you mentioned was a girl's ability to get to the playground twice a week. But within that team dynamics also, was there any specific hurdle in inclusion?
So when we began, it was all male dominated. All of our coaches were males. So even if you talk about equality, unless you have females on the team, it's difficult to actually bring it into practice. So we had to change, the change had to begin from the top. We ourselves had to open up. So we started with including everyone and anyone. We were at that point of time, we were not aiming for sports person only to be on the pitch, but everyone. Change began from the top. We started including them. And that then slowly transformed into having more girls being part of the program. But having girls also part of the program in itself is a challenge, because to convince parents to let the girl come out and play, especially after school hours. During the schools, it's not such a big issue. But once you start practicing, once they get into a serious place, then the challenges are slightly different. The girl wearing short. I think this is not a new one for any one of you. But this even clothes matters to the parents. Traveling with boys team, or even traveling for that matter, is another challenge that we see every now and then. What we have done, as I've said, is that we've started right from the beginning, try to make sure that we are including parents. We make sure that they are visible, like playing. We'll ask them to come and see a match. And I know that it never happens as often. But then share pictures with them. We tell them that, they scored and all. So this makes it easier, slightly easier for them to accept that the child is going to play, and they are able to see her or him in a different light. So that changes the perspective of how parents also see their children.
Amazing. Thank you, sir. We have a bunch more questions. What are the learning experiences gained from participating in sports that can be applied and beneficially transferred to the classroom setting?
Really good question. I think problem solving or critical thinking is one of the things which we try. Like I was saying, like we sometimes after a match, especially if the match that goes really wrong, we have this reflection session where we talk about why did you do something like this? Like why did you pass the ball in a certain direction only? And this then opens the whole question and answer. And it's not to as much to assign blame, but to delve deeper into why someone would do something instead of doing the other way around. And this also then translates. You can bring this to classroom, like, okay, I'm saying this. Do you agree with it? Earlier, when we launched this EduKick program in an Urdu Madhyamik school in Nagpur, the school was on the verge of closing. And so they allowed us actually because they thought that what will we do about it? Like, aake football hi khilayenge. So they thought it was nothing to lose. Our coach was from that community, Sajid. He actually went, taught those girls. Once we went inside the school after almost 2 months, the girls didn't stop questioning us about almost everything. And one of the first impressions when we went there before we started the program was they were so quiet and they were so like afraid. But in 1 month of playing, they were asking questions. They were insistently asking questions. One of the teachers complained actually, ki, Aap karte, what do you do on the field that these girls are asking us so many questions? And me and Sajid were looking at each other and said, like, maybe we are doing something right, because they were opening up. And they were bringing this spirit to the classroom. They were bringing this mindset also to the classroom. Ki they would then ask teachers, why is this why thing they were able to take, because they were able to talk back to us and like, ask us questions. So more than anything, if we say that one thing that sports has done for us, it's opened them up and made them bold enough to ask us what is on their mind. This is one of the things which we've done effectively.
That's a huge shift in confidence and just overall a child's ability to question is such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Abhijit. Any coaches for children with autism or behavior issues? How do you include these children with mainstream children? Is asked by Nikita Dingra, ma'am.
So we have so far not engaged as much with this spectrum. However, we do get 1 or 2 cases. And as I said earlier, also, we try to keep, like, especially if it's not physically impossible for them, we'll try and keep them engaged. As I said, even with children who are all okay, they sometimes don't want to participate physically in the field. They, however, like to sometimes, if a child is very quiet and if you give them a pen and paper and say, like, can you just take down who's scoring goals or some task that is associated with the field, they happily do it. And that then sort of like brings them to the game. Sometimes it's if the child is finding it difficult to move, as I said, like, we will just put them behind the goal and we'll say, can you help us get the balls back? Or keep them in the goal post so that they can just do goalkeeping. So anyway, you can engage them. Anyway, which is safe enough for them to engage is where you should think about it. Our coaches, like our expertise again at the moment is limited to working with deaf children. So other like we wanted to start working with blind also, but we found it difficult slightly. But there are also professional organizations who are doing it independently as well.
You also mentioned, sir, that it's not limited to football, but like any game that sort of works for, because I think some neurodivergent children struggle with touch. So in that sense, a different format can be found.
Yeah. See, it has to suit your need. It is less about the game being played and more about who is playing there with what resources you have. So sports for development is not about competition. It is about how you can use that as a tool, as a platform to engage with, to create a space where like being physically in the moment, that is something which we want to put forward.
Amazing. Gauri Puri has asked, should children be encouraged to play for winning medals for the clubs / state or country at an early stage?
If the child is promising enough, they should be given a pathway, is what I feel. See, we work with numbers. and if you work with many of them, there will always be few who are exceptional, but the vast majority of them would not be. So for us, it becomes that we cater to the bigger number, the base of the pyramid, rather than the 1 or 2 who will make it to the top, because we feel that then our job becomes slightly more challenging. But from purely sports or promoting sports perspective, if you or one of your students is really going good, then it is easier to find a coach who is outside and then help that child work with that. Yes, competition is always good to learn, especially for children, even at younger age. Understanding that there is winning and then there is losing also is really important. Similarly, winning medals and being congratulated in front of the school is one of the best way to boost a child's confidence. So yes, winning is important. So is winning medals for school at an early age is important, but you cannot sacrifice the bigger group while working with, like, you cannot then make the whole class be a part of some team just because you have one student who is the best. The maximum you can do is pick that child, put him in a team, and then work with that.
That is very interesting. So what you're saying is that the purpose is that everybody plays.
Yes.
If someone shows extra potential, then you find a specialized pathway for them.
Yeah.
But the core purpose is that everybody plays.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Abhijit. How can schools and communities collaborate to support and expand sport-based learning opportunities?
See, most of my examples will come mostly from lower income communities also. So most of the schools or rather the communities that we work with, like the kids will go in a bunch, like they will be from the same community attending the same schools. So it's actually an easy way to communicate with them. Pick a sport that is easier or more acceptable for that particular area. It doesn't have to be very costly, as I said, but it has to be something that can be done in that given context. So that's there. Highlighting the child's achievement. One of the things, and we try and avoid it, but we've seen it time and time again, is when we give them the sports kit, sometimes we've seen the child wear it in marriage functions and where else you can see them. So that also becomes a big part of their identity. And they are accepted that way from their parents. So yeah, it may seem small, but having that logo of Slum Soccer on their chest and then just going like they are part of a big team, that is very much there. That also helps us to talk to the parents and get them on board. We will invite them, especially for activities where the child is doing exceptionally well, but we will also invite them just for playing. As I said, it's easier to get the moms than the fathers. So we'll stick with the easy wins and then slowly include as much as possible. So even in some of the instances where the parents are either driving an auto rickshaw, we will just make sure that they are bringing the kids to the football field. So they are also proud to do that at times. Like, sometimes when we talk to parents who are standing on the outside, ask them like, who are you? He'll say, I brought the kids. And then he'll also say that, oh, my kid is also playing there. So that this seemingly sort of unconnected things also help us to include parents and community leaders. And yes, having tournaments in the community, like if there is a small open space also, you take the tournament to the community and suddenly everybody is standing on the outside and cheering for their kids. So this is something which is unique to sports, because this type of competition is more physical. They see the child running, winning or losing. So it's easier to engage the community that way.
Very interesting. I have a follow-up question, which is, given that public play areas, community play areas, very rarely are captured by girl players. Usually, if there's an open ground in a community, you will see a bunch of boys playing cricket, nothing wrong with it. But the claim to public spaces from a female point of view is slightly lower. What would be a few steps that a community can take to sort of make sure there's equal access?
You have to include women coaches right from the beginning. They have to be visible. When you want to promote women in sports, they also have to seem like one of the main team members. So we do that as a going in thing only. Our program in Delhi is completely driven by women, and the girls are coming out in higher number. Of course, the efforts take slightly longer, but in this case, it wasn't. It was as soon as we created a safe space, the girls were there. As soon as we had cleaned the community pitch, they were there. So when you want to claim an open space, especially, and as you rightly pointed out, the boys play more often than girls. But once you start training the girls, when they get an opportunity to represent and like put on the team T-shirt and play against each other, they also claim their own space. Like that 1 hour, boys know that they are not welcome there. Sometimes they will create something, but having the senior coach or having most of these girls would also have a brother or brother who is there, and then having them also play in a separate team, sometimes just standing there helps us to then build it in.
Amazing. This is really helpful. Thank you, Abhijit. We have one more question.
Yes.
In a primary school structure, this is from Gina Bhumi.
Yeah.
In a primary school structure, how do I make sure post my intervention, these structure of reflection and minor games are continued? What are the ways in which I can invite teachers to take ownership? Because I intend to develop collaboration in teachers too, and want that culture to sustain in the school, inside and outside the classroom.
That's a lot of question.
Yeah.
You break it down. I'll try and answer the best I can. So you want to know like the sessions that you start in the school in a school setting, how do they continue even after you are not there or if you have moved on, right?
That's the first question.
Yes. So it's difficult, like working in school settings, especially if these are government schools. One of the big challenges is that they do not prioritize sports as one of the things that they even, first of all, the teachers are always overburdened, or so it seems. So it's difficult for you to get traction. Let me just state it right away that it is a challenge for us also when we're working in primary schools, especially because primary schools do not have a dedicated PE teacher. One of the class teachers is supposed to take them out and engage them in sports.
Yeah.
Unless the teacher is naturally inclined towards sports, it becomes difficult. But that's also one of the good things is finding one of the teachers who is more inclined towards taking kids outside, because not everyone is going to be there. If you want to sort of make sure that it is continuing, work with that one school teacher who is more inclined towards sports rather than pulling everyone in. And as I said, like leave the equipment there. Like this is what we do. Even after our activities is done, our equipment is stored at the school. And we've told them, as long as you take care of it, you can use it as much as you want. One of the things that stops children from playing is the access to equipments. So you just leave them there. Even unstructured play, as long as it is safe, is still play. They need that. It doesn't mean that having adult supervision is always the best thing. For play, they make their own rules also, and which is one of the ways that they learn better. So like, I don't know if I've exactly answered your question, but yeah, engage with those teachers who are more inclined towards it. If you have equipment, leave it open with rules, of course. You can't be having, and especially if it is safe.
Amazing. And what are the ways in which they can invite teachers to take ownership?
I think you guys are better at it than I am. We were directly, which is, I'm thinking about where we were able to pass on the ownership very successfully. In few instances where we did, it was also more because that person themselves were more interested in what we were doing and they were directly related to the child. So yes, one of the parents actually, fathers actually started assisting one of our coaches. We then one mother also in Delhi, especially, she went and she did a licensing, the grassroots licensing, and is now working also as a coach. These are the instances where we were able to actually pass some level of ownership from us to them. I think the structure helped us. This training where she went and she gained the certification was a big step for her to then say that, okay, I can also do it. If there is an equivalent of this in classroom setting, and then that could also be done. If there is a certificate course that makes them like, certified, they really appreciate that.
Great. How can we train and encourage kids for individual sport as in school children comes in big numbers?
Oh yeah, that's a challenge. That's really a challenge. See, individual sports, like again, we recently started athletics, so we know that it is a big challenge. We do so high. If it is a high school, you will definitely have a PE teacher. So the PE teacher becomes that one resource person who can help and guide the child. If the child, as we discussed earlier, also is an exceptional child, then you need to find him a club nearby. Nearby is the key, because a lot of children drop off. Also, one of the big reasons they drop off is the distance of the play field is sometimes access to that play field by bus or by travel is too far away. So you will have to find a coach or a club which is nearby. Usually these clubs, the smaller ones, are not that costly, but they are a good start for any child to have.
Great. There's a Hindi question which I will read and then translate to English. क्या कभी ऐसा हुआ है, this is from Akshay Dikshit ji, कि कोई अवांछनीय स्थिति सामने आई हो, कोई दुर्घटना etc. उस समय में आप क्या कर सकते हैं? Like you've been mentioning safety a lot. So how do you, I guess the question is, how do you counter this?
So child protection and safeguarding is one of the most important things and the first thing that we teach our coaches. Because these girls, the boys, they depend on one of the adults to travel with them at locations. They have to use changing rooms, which becomes challenging. So we have rules, we have trainings around that in the first place. So see, a simple thing like traveling in groups, the coach has to take permission from all the parents. When it comes to changing room, if it's the same changing room that both the boys and the girls use, then the timing is to be differentiated. One of the senior girls will go and check. If it is not, then the male and the female will go together, staff will go together, check it out. And only when it is safe, then allow the girls to use the changing room. These are all the practical things that we faced. So that is yes. But also for practices which are beyond the normal time limits, information and communication to parents becomes the key. Also training children about their own safety and standards is one of the first things that we do. So child protection and safeguarding is at the core of all of the activities. Even our deaf coaches have to undergo child protection and safety, which involves all the elements of the sports, whether it is practice, whether it is injury, during injury, what to do, where to touch, where not to touch, how to ask permission, even to lift someone who's fallen on the field, during travel, during changing room. All of this is taught beforehand.
That is incredible to hear, Abhijit. I think in terms of safety, there's multiple types of safety that you have mentioned. One is the kind of safety of injury. The other is just physical safety. And there are a few practical rules that you follow to make sure that children are kept safe on their travels. Great. There's one last question. How can sports activities be done where there are no space for even prayers to?
That is one of the biggest challenges that all of our schools face, more and less. The idea would be again finding a place which is close enough. So if you want to get them physically engaged, a classroom will be difficult because it will always have some sort of furniture.
Yeah.
If it's for smaller children, then you can maybe do small sort of physical activities. But as the children grow, they will need some sort of open space. It can be a park. It can be a parking lot also. But you need some physical space. So age related, like also the size of the group, you will have to find access to some or the other open space. There is no replacement for that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abhijit. We are at the end of our questions. It has been an absolute delight to hear from you. Sports is a big part of what I think education is. I think one of the reasons our education seems incomplete today in today's world is because, as you rightly pointed out, there's one physical exercise period a week, which is not nearly enough to build character. It was great to hear from you, all the work that you do. We'll be sharing your contact with all our participants.
Please.
I would like for participants to mention any two key takeaways from today's session in the chat. We will also be sharing the feedback form. It is already shared once. Request all of you to share two key takeaways in the chat window. And Abhijit, thank you so much for taking the time for
Thank
bringing your expertise here today. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rupinder Garg ma'am is saying that the poll question really shook her. Yeah, that's true. I don't think I have played after my 12th standard ever, like played in general. Suma is sharing her key takeaways, which is safety and life lessons to include in sports. Enhancing engagement through sports is what Priyanka Vora is sharing. Rajesh Kumar sir is saying life skills, which are very important. Sports, especially outdoor games, are very important for overall development of a child. Sports values. Great. I hope all of you keep sharing your